In this video, I'm going to be discussing wealth, and wealth as in terms of accruing goods and the necessities that we need to be able to live meaningful lives, but not just live meaningful lives, endeavor for what's meaningful and what we have these specific intentions that relate to optimal living and what we value and find meaningful and what we appreciate about life, but also in relation to the goods and necessities that we consume that we need ultimately to regulate and reduce the frequency as well as the severity or magnitude of negative emotions or negativity in general, as well as to promote greater positivity through things like self strengths and strengthening and also developing the self in terms of these goods, and goods not just in terms of thingness, but goods in terms of boundness, and considering the material and the immaterial substance of goods and necessities, and ultimately what we need to be able to live meaningful lives in particular, and to endeavor for more, and to continue on this endeavoring, often through our first-hand efforts and labors, and what we volitionally take and undertake in terms of our enterprisings for developing uh, wealth generation and accumulating these wealths through our laborings and our workings and our efforts and our willful volition, right? Because a lot of what makes work meaningful has to do with meaningful interest in our subjective experience and our direct engagements in work and meaningful engagements, meaningful interest in the work we do, and meaningful laborings that start with the self and self knowing. Not so much know how or know what or know why, but knowing, and knowing through the self and developing knowledge that pertains to our existence and in relation to our work and what we do, and particularly the meaning intrinsic to that, as well as the value, the goods, and the necessities that we need ultimately to sustain and support optimal well being, and also to cultivate a deeper sense of virtuousness and self strength and strengthening through this process, because work is laborious and it's effortful and it does cost us in terms of our time, our energy, our well-being, our in other ways we have to consume resources and rely on our own contemplative knowledge. This is priceless. This is priceless information, and the workings of the mind often don't always go appreciated, and it's important to appreciate this to be able to engage more meaningfully, not just in our work, but in every aspect of our lives. And when we generate these wealths, particularly through our own enterprisings, this is what gives us more freedom. And it also gives us a capacity to be more virtuous and to act um, in more of these free volitional ways in accordance with what we find meaningful and value and what we endeavor to do by generating these goods and obtaining the necessities and regulating our own well-being, so diminishing negativity but also increasing experiences of positivity and particularly also meaningfulness and a sense of purposefulness in the world through our engagements and our individual autonomy that involves this interest and meaningful interest in pretty much every avenue of our existence and everything that we do, or what we can appreciate. And it's through this pathway of meaningful interest that we can engage more meaningfully in work, and also um, not just recognize the direct meanings there and acquire these necessities in which we consume and in which provides us with the essential resources to living well and being well, but it gives us a self-directed education on merit and self-merit and what we value and what we deem to be good character and good in general and the goods of society in which we enjoy and consume, in which we largely need, and which we can create abundance in relation to our appetites for meaning and our endeavoring through our enterprising in our own self-directed efforts and workings. And it's through these workings, often contemplative workings, and deliberating and considering what's meaningful to us as individuals and what we deem as meaningful work or valuable, or what is also not just meaningful work, but the meaningful goods or the necessities that we acquire from work, and the sources of goods and necessities. And it's the sourcing and the resourcing and good sourcing and good resourcing that allows us to not just live more meaningful existences, but which expands to our surroundings and allows others to appreciate goods and the gooder qualities of existence in relation to the generation of goods, necessities, and abundance, as well as these wealths. And wealths in terms of things like money or points or cryptocurrencies that have these monetary values that are inherent and inherently synthetic and pertain to the syntheses of existence involving the working mind and the nature of the mind and the existence of the mind. And when I'm referring here to the working mind, I'm referring to conscious and unconscious processes. I'm not talking about, for example, when you're engaged in a thinking mode or a thoughtful mode, even though that is a form of psychological and mental work. But that I want to make sure, like, contemplative thought is that type of work, but the mind is always working. So I want to make sure that these are distinct. And because the mind is always working, it also has these concerns of consumption, and it necessitates the acquisition of goods and our desire or crave for goods and meanings, and our endeavoring for those goods and meanings and those necessities that we need to optimize our individual well-being and lives, and to live more soulfully and meaningfully, and have these worthwhile existences in which we want to continue in the future, and which we want to not just continue in the future, we want to often extend or self-express ourselves in these immortalizing ways through often our workings and our enterprising and entrepreneurship, in which we produce these values and create wealth and generate goods and services, and also innovations that benefit society in the long term and also near term, and even can happen in the current right now moments that we engage in meaningful interests or work through insight or thought or knowledge generation, or even direct goods and direct manifestations of innovation. But innovation more broadly has these various components that have this incorporeal and corporeal aspect. That means there's a material element and an immaterial substance to innovation, in which we have things like innovative interests or thoughts and ideations. And these help to catalyze the meaningful engagement that allows us to engage more in these innovative work behaviors and enterprise and create value and generate goods and resources that people want and that we want, and usually starts with what we want or what we find meaningful or deem meaningful, or what gives us a sense of purpose, and also the intents in relation to the meanings that we perceive to be meaningful in terms of generating value and goods and self-virtue and what we deem to be in a line with good character, that as a collective we tend to attribute a sense of virtuousness that is universal to maintaining and sustaining civilization, has these universalizing characteristics that allows us to not just benefit ourselves and generate goods and necessities and wealth for ourselves, but ends up, ironically, expanding the potential and possible possibilities for wealth generation and accumulation around us, and leads to more richer societies that have more innovation and access to these goods and necessities, but also opportunities for greater endeavoring and also soulful existing in relation to our own existences, and enterprising in that direction, in which we generate the values, the resources, the goods, the wealth, and the self-strengthenings alongside our own individual efforts or workings or laborings, and what we find meaningful, that tends to lead to optimal living and a worthwhile existence. So that's all I wanted to say for Wealthsz. I'll be discussing this more, but I hope you enjoy. Have a good one.